Mr. Rowan Gibson is the president of Global Innovation Consultancy and also the co-founder of innovationexcellence.com, which is a blog. He is the best-selling author of 2 major books, which have been published in different languages, over 20 of them, and he has been referred to by the media as Mr. Innovation, the Innovation Grandmaster, and the guru amongst gurus. Rowan has worked with a lot of big brands such as Apple, Bayer, British Telecom, Coca-Cola, amongst many others. He spends his time traveling around the world teaching innovations and mentoring leaders on the importance of innovation, and he has shared his knowledge in over 54 countries around the world. His theme today is going to be winning in the innovation economy. So please join me, ladies and gentlemen, to welcome Mr. Rowan Gibson.
Anyway, no, I'm delighted to be here. It is always an honor for me to address a room full of leaders and potential leaders. Today is no exception. Dubai is one of my favorite places, so it's always beautiful to be back. I have been doing whatever on earth it is that I'm doing for 16, 17 years now, and as you heard, all around the world. And I would argue that it is the #1 strategic priority for both the public sector and the private sector. Let's take a look at the public sector story. We heard a few comments there earlier from Mohammed about the way the world's leaders, political leaders, have recognized the innovation imperative. The Economist, which is a magazine that is not given to hyperbole and exaggeration, stated that innovation is now recognized as the single most important ingredient in any modern economy. President Obama stated a couple of years ago that the United States led the world's economies in the 20th century because we led the world in innovation. Today, he says, competition is keener, the challenge is tougher, and that's why innovation is now more important than ever. In fact, he said, innovation will be the currency of the 21st century. And talking of currency, he put aside $100 billion for the strategy for American innovation, which has helped to start nurturing some of the innovative developments over there in the US. Just a few months ago in Europe, this thing, the Horizon 2020, was announced, which is an attempt to create the Innovation Union, to pool the resources across Europe to try to nurture and support innovation. And here we have a budget of 80 billion euros, which, as far as I know today, is worth around about $120 billion. So it's even more than the US is putting into innovation. President Hu Jintao has stated that really what it's about today is enhancing the nation's capacity for innovation so as to seize the initiative in global competition. As you heard in my introduction, I spend a lot of time these days in Latin America. This is the president of Colombia. Innovation is the basic driving force for high economic growth. So wherever we look in the world, we're seeing leaders that have recognized the innovation imperative. And that's true right here in Dubai and in the UAE. I think this is probably the most poetic and perhaps the most profound statement of all. Innovation is like an infinite pool of achievement, from your Prime Minister right here. An infinite pool of achievement. And if you think back to what Sheikh Zayed achieved here, it really was about taking a desert and having the vision to see a fabulous city-state and a fabulous region that could be built basically on the power of innovation. And that's true of the whole GCC. But really, it's not just about how do we grow the economy through innovation. How do we create a great standard of living and world-class quality for our people. For many of you in the audience, it's not about the public sector, it's about the private sector. It's about how do we grow the business. And one of the things that we're coming to recognize is that the only way for us to drive growth and wealth creation over the longer term, and I mean literally the only way, is for us to innovate. It is not about cost cutting. It is not about Six Sigma. It is not about mergers and acquisitions. It is about innovation. These are the things that really drive growth. Let me illustrate that with a little tiny company that some of you may have heard of. When Steve Jobs made his second coming to Apple in 1997, how much was Apple actually worth? Anybody remember the total stock market value of Apple in 1997? Any guesses? How many? In billions of dollars, total stock market value was actually $2 billion. Not bad, actually. I mean, if I had $2 billion here up on the stage, I think nobody would turn their nose up. But how much is Apple worth today in 2012? Latest figures? $390 billion. So how do you go from being a dead duck worth $2 billion to the most valuable property on Wall Street worth $390 billion in the space of 13 or 14 years? How do you do that? And the answer in one word is innovation. I mean, did it come from anywhere else? Tell me. Did it come from cost cutting? Let's try to produce the world's cheapest laptop. Did it come from downsizing? Did it come from mergers? Let's merge with Compaq. Let's merge with Dell and try to look for the synergies and so on. None of that stuff. All of that growth came from innovation, from coming up with fabulous new products and services that create incredible new value for customers. Whether it was the iMac, the iPod, the iTunes Music Store, which is now, of course, a game store and the movie store and so on, and the bookstore. It's the iPhone, it's the App Store, it's the Apple retail stores, it's the iPad. All of that stuff is innovation. Service company. But General Electric, Procter & Gamble, IBM, what do these guys have to say about innovation? Well, let's start with General Electric. And if any of you feel that you're pressured, by the way, to grow by a significant percentage every year, spare a thought for Jeff Immelt of General Electric. Because this guy is on the hook to deliver about $12 billion of new growth per year. $12 billion per year. That's $1 billion of new revenues per month added to the business model. How on earth is he going to do that? Jeff Immelt says the only answer for us today is innovation. I love that statement because it is so unambiguous. Jeff doesn't say one of the many things we're looking at on a whole shopping list of possibilities, somewhere down at number 12, is innovation. He says the only answer for us today at GE is innovation. And this, by the way, is a company that has tried every other answer. If you go back to the tenure of Jack Welch, it really was all about fanatical cost-cutting and Six Sigma and mergers and acquisitions and so on. But Jeff Immelt recognizes that we are living in a new era. It is the innovation economy. And in the innovation economy, the only thing that works is innovation. P&G. Bob McDonald, not too long ago, took over from Alan Lafley as CEO, and he looked back on what had made P&G successful over the last decade or so, and he says basically all the organic sales growth that P&G achieved over the past 9 years has come from innovation. IBM, again, recent new CEO, Ginny Rometty, started in January. Her first statement was, for CEOs today, it's all about achieving growth through innovation. And so what we're concluding is that growth is fueled by innovation alone. And the flip side of that, if you look at the bottom of the slide, is that where there is no innovation, ultimately, there's no growth. Sony was the coolest company on the planet. When Sony was the Apple of its day, right? Sony fell behind the innovation curve. Where's Sony today? Does anybody remember the Sony Walkman? Some of you look too young to remember the Sony Walkman. But in 1979, that was a big deal, wasn't it? Followed up by the Tapeman and the Discman and whatever else. Let me ask you this. If any company on planet Earth was capable of coming up with the iPod, who was it? Sony! Sony ruled the world of the portable media player. Apple wasn't even in that business. Apple was in the computer business. They weren't a consumer electronics company like Philips or whatever else, or Sony. If any company on earth could have done iTunes, who was it? Sony. They even had their own music company. If anybody could have done the iPhone, who was it? Sony. They had their own cell phone business. Sony Ericsson. Apple wasn't in the cell phone industry. And so if you fall behind the innovation curve, you find that somebody else comes along and grabs all of those opportunities that you should have had. About growth. Innovation is also about renewal, about strategic renewal. We are in a world of hyper-accelerating change, a world of hyper-competition and all those other terms that you used. It's a world of rapid commoditization of whatever it is that we do, not just our products and services, but also our capabilities. Today become very quickly commoditized. And it's a world where the customer now has more power than ever before in history. And in that world, business models don't last anywhere near as long as they used to. Note the sell-by date on the egg. Business models today become broken much more quickly than ever before in business history. Just take a look at some of the industries up here on the slide. Whether it's the music industry or the movie industry, television, advertising. Coca-Cola's up there supposed to represent advertising. By the way, the advertising traditionally lived off of the TV business. And the TV business traditionally lived off the advertising business. But today, with all those eyeballs leaving the television and going onto the internet, it changes the game. Because I cannot interrupt your web browsing for 6 minutes and show you a bunch of ads. So what happens to those models? And if you think about television, most of us have cable TV, which means we're paying a cable TV company to give us a bunch of channels. But today with IPTV, Internet Protocol Television, we just go online and go straight to CNN, or we go to the Disney Channel or whatever we want to watch, and we can watch it streaming. I don't even need the TV company anymore, the cable TV. Financial services, travel, telecoms. Who could have envisaged a world where we can make telephone calls for free with Skype, or video conferences for free? You know, the word free just destroys the business model. Automotive shifts into a world of electric cars and very small cars. Energy, which is of course relevant for this region where we're looking beyond oil, beyond petroleum, into renewable sources of energy. Fast food was fine until we all realized that the world's #1 problem is no longer malnutrition, but obesity. So we won't eat all that fat anymore. What do you do if you produce millions of tons of fat every year? Well, take a look at what's happening to the fast food chains, shifting to grilled chicken and salads and whatever else. Media. Some of us may be in the media industry. You have my pity. It's an industry that's dying, whether we look at magazines, whether we look at books and whatever else. Even pharmaceuticals. For a couple of hundred years, the pharmaceutical industry hasn't changed. It's been about chemistry. It's been about mixing a bunch of stuff together, creating a compound, and figuring out whether it does anything to the human body that's of any use. And if it does do that, are there any negative side effects? And can we somehow negate those side effects so that we can give at least 90% of the population the benefits? Whatever. So it's all been about chemistry. But now we're shifting to a world of biology. So we have pharmacogenomics. We have medicine that's designed for your individual DNA. So we don't need that chemical model anymore. We need a biological model, which means we don't need to basically hire chemists, we need to hire biologists. The whole model is shifting. So all these business models are up for grabs. Did any of you read this book? Russian doll, the Matryoshka doll. When you first look at it, you think it's simple, right? But when you start opening it out, you realize it goes down to all these other layers and levels. And it takes all of those levels nested together to make the thing what it is. So is it with quality. In order to make quality happen, we needed all this stuff. New values, new skills, new processes, new metrics, new management systems, new IT solutions, and all of that had to be nested together and integrated as a system in order to make quality happen. So my logical argument is that if it took that approach to turn quality from a department into an enterprise capability, it takes exactly the same approach to make innovation happen. And that's what I've been focused on in my own work, my book, Innovation to the Core, a blueprint for transforming the way your company innovates. One of the things that we really stress in the book is that most companies only look at the front end of innovation. They think it's all about sparking creativity and new ideas and whatever else. My argument here is that if all we're doing is sparking the creativity, but we're not building the engine around those spark plugs, then none of those ideas are ever going to make it from the mind to the market. So the issue becomes, how do we build the system, the organizational system? An engine is a system. Now, if you were to drop all of the components of an engine here on the stage or on the floor, and you were to say, Rowan, can you build me an engine? I wouldn't have a clue how to put it together. But if you gave me a blueprint, and you said, this is the intake valve, this is the piston, this is the connecting rod, this is the clutch, I still couldn't build an engine. But at least I would have some idea about how it all fits together as a system. Where we've gone wrong so far in innovation is we've said you need new values, and you need new skills, and you need new processes, and you need new management systems, but we didn't really give you a blueprint for how it all fits together. And so what we found in our research is that if you want to make anything, an enterprise capability, whether it's quality, whether it's customer service, whether it's supply chain management or anything else, you have to do it by addressing the same 4 organizational components. It's about leadership commitment and management infrastructure. It's about systematic processes and tools that you give to everyone. Again, think about quality. It is about people and skills. It's not just about imposing new processes and systems on people. It's about helping people grow and take on those new roles and change their mindsets and behaviors. And it's also about culture and values. And where a lot of companies go wrong is that they go straight to the last cog in the engine and they say, we're going to build an innovation culture. We're going to flip a light switch and on Monday morning everyone's going to be an innovator. Well, how many of you have ever been involved in a culture change program? How many of you know how difficult that is, right, to change a company's culture? And so my recommendation is, my strong recommendation, is never ever start with the last cog. Always start with the first 3. Because what happens is that people begin to see that our leaders are truly committed to innovation, that there's a new infrastructure with a VP of innovation, and managers of innovation, and mentors of innovation, and so on. And I'm actually being involved today in innovation teams. People begin to see that there are new processes. And the business model innovation has become a true focus today for many, many companies. Why? Well, because products and services are so easily commoditized, it's so easy to replicate. Business models are not so easy to replicate. For example, if Walmart wanted to become Amazon.com, they would have to close down all of their stores and try to catch up. It's never going to happen. So business model innovation is, number 1, about coming up with ways to create competitive advantage within your industry, within your current business model. But it's also about finding ways to move beyond your current business model into new lines of business that you weren't in before, addressing new customer segments that you weren't addressing before, and going into new markets or even creating new markets that didn't exist before. This is what business model innovation is about. And that means that R&D alone is not enough. If we think that all we need for innovation is research and development, we're wrong. Why? Well, because how many of those forms of innovation that I just described are we going to get from R&D? Do you think you're going to get business model innovation from R&D? Cost structure innovation? Customer experience innovation? Marketing strategy innovation? None of those forms of innovation are going to come from those scientists in R&D. So we need to broaden innovation out and involve everyone across the entire company. Innovation truly must become an all-the-time, everywhere capability. Essentially a new corporate way of life. It also means that we need to look beyond the organization, let the outside in. So everyone today talks about open innovation. I define open innovation as not just outside, but also inside. These innovators come to their discoveries is not by sitting there staring out of the window waiting for a light bulb to go off above their heads, you know, eureka. But it's actually by looking at the world from a fresh perspective. And we were able, through looking at 200 or 300 cases of successful business innovation, we were able to identify 4 basic perspectives that the innovators use, either consciously or mostly subconsciously, to discover these opportunities that are, if you like, hidden in plain sight. And here are those 4 perspectives. We think of them as lenses. Using those lenses, you'll be able to see those opportunities. The first lens is called challenging orthodoxy. So taking conventional wisdom inside an industry or inside your company and turning it on its head. The second lens is called harnessing trends. Getting a grip on all of the changes that are taking place in all kinds of areas, lifestyles, technologies, demographics, and so on, and bringing the power of that change into the business model to create new value for customers. The third lens is called leveraging resources. It's thinking of your organization as a collection of core competencies and strategic assets that can be stretched into new opportunities. And the fourth lens of innovation is called understanding needs. It's getting an understanding of those deep consumer needs, getting under the skin of the customer and trying to figure out what the customer needs before the customer even knows what the customer needs. These are the... Why are watermelons round? And you say, Rowan, they've always been round since the beginning of time. They're supposed to be round. That's the way God created them. But if you think about a round watermelon, it really doesn't make a lot of sense. If you're a farmer, you're traveling to market, they're rolling around in the back of your truck. It's like a football. You know, if you buy one, you put it in the back of the car, it rolls around in the trunk of your car. You put it in the refrigerator, you open the door, it rolls out and it hits you on the foot. Rolls across the kitchen. You put it on the table, you try to slice it and it's rolling around the table. But if you had a square watermelon, think about all the advantages. As a farmer, I can stack them. You know, I can fit them neatly into the shopping basket in the back of the car. I can fit them neatly into the refrigerator. And if I put it on the table and slice it, it's not going to move. Plus, it makes a beautiful opening story at the dinner party. That's why this thing is a popular fashion food today in Japan. This is not trick photography, this is real. And the real story here is that those Japanese farmers can charge you a premium for a square watermelon as opposed to a round one. So they can actually ask you more money just for the different shape. Here's the question. How do you create a square watermelon? Do you have to go in and change the genetic code so that it grows? How do you do it? You grow it in a box. It sounds so obvious now, looking back, doesn't it? But how many of us would have challenged the orthodoxy that a watermelon doesn't have to be round? But you know, in 1983, Motorola launched the first commercial mobile phone. That's 1983. This is 2003. Clearly something massive was going to go on here. And it's about how do we recognize this trend and do something about it. Nokia recognized the trend, did something about it in '92 with the launch of GSM. I like that picture there, mobile telephony. And they were able to have the courage to get out of everything else they were doing and follow the trend. Anybody here from Finland? You know, I have lots of friends in Finland that still own a pair of Nokians. That's the rubber boots. They were literally called Nokians. That's the sort of stuff that Nokia was doing. Over in China, the founder of BYD said, if mobile telephony is the trend, then why don't we become the premium supplier of rechargeable batteries to the cell phone industry. Every single one of those phones is going to need a battery. 10 years later, he was the richest man in China. I mean, in China alone, 750 million people have a cell phone. But again, this guy didn't stop there. He said, what's the next trend? Well, back in 2002, with the success of the Toyota Prius, we could see that we were moving into a world of electric cars. And every single one of those electric cars requires what? A rechargeable battery. So why don't we become the premium supplier of batteries to the automobile industry? In 2009, they went one step further and actually launched their own car, the BYD Auto. One of Disney's core competencies, which is a thing they call three-dimensional entertainment, which you'll find in the theme parks, Disneyland, Disney World, and so on. At the bottom, you will see some of the assets, the brand name, the franchises around those animated movies, and so on. What Disney was able to do was to say, what would happen if we took that core competence in three-dimensional entertainment out of the theme parks, recombined it with those assets at the bottom of the slide, and took that into some new context to create new value. And that context was Broadway. It was the West End in London. It was turning those animated movies into theater productions. And they've since become some of the world's most successful box office hits. How many of us needed any of this stuff on the slide? How many of us needed Google Earth, iTunes, Amazon, Starbucks, eBay, Skype, Twitter? Well, obviously we all needed all of it because now we can't live without it. It's like oxygen. But how many of us were actually crying out for these things? Dear Google, could you give me like a system where I could look down from space and find any... Apple, could you give me like an online music store? No, I mean, none of us were asking for any of this, but we clearly needed it. And so it's about how do we discover those needs and address them before the competitors. How much do you really know about your customers' unsolved problems, unmet needs and wants? How deep are you digging to find them? When I say digging, by the way, I'm not referring to digging. I don't even mean digging. I mean digging really deep to find the stuff that everyone else has missed. What's wrong with tires? Nothing, unless you have a blowout or you're going on vacation, you need to pump them up and so on. So Michelin have come up with a tire that's got no air in it at all. It's based on a system of really powerful rubber spokes. Only looks ugly because we've taken the outside out to show you what's in the inside, but if you put the outside on, it looks